SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
iGaming Daily is, of course, brought to you in partnership with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 56% of the EGR Power 50 personalised player experiences with Optimove. Now, as a special offer, Optimove is offering new clients a free first month when they sign up for Optimove. For more information and to claim that free month, just go to optimove.com/SBC. And you'll also be able to find that link in the podcast episode description. On Thursday, the British electorate heads to the polls to decide the outcome of the general election. A 6-week campaign has seen political betting dragged into the shenanigans, thanks to the sheer stupidity of the Conservative Party's GambleGate fiasco. Shrieking headlines aside, iGaming Daily today discusses Thursday's guaranteed outcome of voter apathy, as a depressed turnout will simply reflect the current and future state of British politics. And away from election week, and on a slightly more positive note, SBC's Ted Menmuir will make his pitch for Minister of Tourism of Georgia, as he describes his experience at last week's SBC Tbilisi Summit. I'm Martyn Elliott, and welcome to today's iGaming Daily, when I am joined by Ted Menmuir, our content director, and also by payment expert editor Ted Orme-Claye. So, good afternoon to both of you. How are you doing, Ted?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thanks, Martin. How about yourself?
Pretty well. Just about recovered from our trip to Canada the other week, and so that was nice. And delighted to be back and reading hundreds of headlines about the general election and the general low quality of candidate across the board in that contest. So. And Ted, how are you?
Good, Martin, and I'm responsible for bringing the good vibes to the UK.
Excellent.
To English football and English politics. You don't have to thank me.
No. Well, somebody's got to be bringing the good vibes in the football and the politics, because
it is. It's an election of vibes. It's the vibe elections, and we found out why Rishi made his call. This was a big gamble. England to win, Conservatives to win on Thursday.
Wow. I think England's a great
strategy.
Yeah. I mean, he probably he was thinking like the 1966 election, which legend has it was swayed by England winning the World Cup. But obviously, all historians know the election took place before the World Cup, so it made absolutely no difference. And I think the idea that a very well remunerated 20-year-old who lives in Madrid is going to save the Tory party is somewhat far-fetched in the current circumstances. But while I've got you there, Ted, which constituency do you live in?
I live in Edgware, so it's I don't know. I don't know who my MP is, but again, I'm returning to the positive vibes, and that's how I choose my candidate.
Okay, that seems fair. I was going to check the odds in your constituency.
Look, Martin, I have checked out of the UK for the past 2 weeks. So in this podcast, you're going to have to address me like you would a little puppy dog, right? Like I have no knowledge of anything happening on the ground. I read about the GambleGate fiasco. As soon as they put in the word gamble and gate into the phrase, I just emotionally checked out. I could not write anything about that.
It is lazy just to put the word gate on the end of everything, isn't it?
There are too many gates in the UK.
Yeah.
We need a new term for scandal, don't we?
Yeah. Royal Gate, Cake Gate.
Yeah. I mean, that is a very depressing thought. So
that should be in a campaign manifesto. Get rid of gates.
Yeah. Farmers are going to be opposed to that, I think, but that's a different matter.
You see, I'm coming up with all the good ideas, man.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you just zone out, you check out. I've checked out, like Rishi Sunak has checked out of this campaign election.
Wow. I'm delighted by the idea you might be getting a multi-million-pound job in California in a couple of weeks' time, Ted. Well done.
When can we expect your candidacy, Ted? For your own party, the Vibes Party? When can we expect the manifesto? I mean, obviously, it's a bit too late for this election, but the next one, you've got 5 years, theoretically.
But then you're betting on the vibes of the UK. So what will the vibes be in 5 years? And
that's a
But it would have been epic had he done it this weekend, because it would have clashed with the Glasgow vibes meets the football vibes meets election vibes, and that would have been epic, like three vibes clashing together.
And Jeremy Corbyn would have been absolutely finished in his constituency because all his voters would have been in a field in Somerset listening to Coldplay. So,
that would have genuinely been a real gate moment. Like that would have been, appreciative of the word, like GambleGate, Glastonbury,
Glasgowgate,
the Euros election, all in one weekend. Bang. Super Sunday.
Yeah, just a mega gate all on one day. Be excellent. So, a quick poll then. So, Ted, what are you finding most depressing? England's performance at the Euros or the general election campaign?
I'd say, obviously, the general election campaign, we've kind of come to expect these sort of things from British politics, I think, although I guess some of the absurdities of this one haven't been seen for a while. But I think over the years, I think we've just kind of got used to British politics being quite uninspiring. We're used to almost every election being not necessarily a vote for, let's say, if there's a change of government, it's very rarely a vote for the party that's coming in, it's a vote against the party that's going out. Obviously Corbyn's campaign got a lot of passion around it, didn't it, among certain segments of sort of Britain's political spectrum. But for the most part, we lead quite dull campaigns and often have fairly dull leaders, I think, regardless of whatever their political persuasion. So I've come to expect this from the elections. Whilst with England, we were obviously favourites to win the tournament. There was a lot of hype around it, a lot of young players, and the performances have just fallen quite flat a lot of the time, I think, in most people's opinion. So I'd say, I think that England's Euros campaign has been a bit more depressing than the election, frankly. Yeah.
Well, I certainly spent 95 minutes yesterday remembering I was born in Cardiff and wasn't, in fact, English. So, what about you, Ted? What have you been finding most depressing?
I genuinely think that they both kind of cancel out each other. So you can't avoid the two. And they're both kind of intermingled together. But yesterday was a real slog. Coming off a week in Tbilisi, where, you saw a young, passionate team beat Portugal, people out on the streets, the whole, the whole of that town covered in red, flares going off everywhere. And then just the positivity to that within kind of 5 minutes of watching England play again, just killed any passion in me. And it was such a downer to what have been actually one of the best weeks of my life. So thanks, Southgate. But he gets through. I mean, genuinely, he is a blessed man, Gareth Southgate. Like, in other cultures, right, we'd be appreciative of just how lucky this man is. He could be like a modern Buddha, actually. No, he could be. Like, we should be worshipping him because he lucks out. And luck is such an important, like, in Asian society, luck is an incredible thing. And Southgate has it. And we should appreciate that. Again, returning to vibes.
That's interesting. I was going to say he's a bit like John Major scraping through in 1992 in an uninspired fashion, but, Buddha if you prefer. So I'm sure he would prefer Buddha to John Major anyway. So
do you think there'll be like university courses in like 50 years' time talking about the great Gareth Southgate and how luck became him. And if he wins it, Jesus, like.
Do you think that'd fit more under philosophy or like business management sort of stuff? Which subject do you think? Or is this going to be its own standalone topic now? We're going to get Southgate studies. We're going to get. Is this going to be your new calling, actually, Ted? You're going to, forget all the vibes party and all that. You're going to become the first professor of Southgate studies. I'm sure some university, like Bolton University, will be desperate enough for some fresh courses. Maybe. Yeah, no offence to Bolton, but or any of our listeners who may have attended Bolton, but
once they see my notes on today's podcast and what I am contributing to this election.
Speaking of vibes, to be fair, guys, do we reckon? I've noticed that England have been a bit less entertaining to watch since Southgate ditched the whole waistcoat and suit vibes, and now he's rocking up wearing his polo, just looking like a dad who's having a bit of a game of golf on Saturday. Now he's sort of dropped the business attire. I think they've become a little less exciting.
I think it's a fair point. But if to buy into that, you would also have to buy into the idea we're missing Ashley Young, Jesse Lingard, and Dele Alli out of the team. So I'm not sure I can buy into that too much.
Fair enough. From a footballing standpoint, yeah. I see your point there, Martyn.
Do you think if he was winning, do you think like Keir, or if he was winning with the waistcoat, do you think Keir and Rishi would adopt that? Like they did with like the Olympic, like Cameron did and Blair did with like the Olympic tie. There, guys. That's why they pay me the big bucks.
I mean, the England football team is sponsored by Marks and Spencers. I don't think Rishi is going to downgrade his tailoring choices to M&S from whatever Savile Row tailor he currently uses. But,
can I just say that I think us three would make a great political think tank. We should pitch our services.
Some might argue that Ed Davey has already been listening to us in this campaign.
I mean, speaking of vibes, Ed Davey, he's got some adventurous vibes, hasn't he? I saw he was bungee jumping today, and the other week he was canoeing and all that, I think he's got the vibes kind of nailed down.
He's trying everything. I mean, it's just... Because at least with GambleGate, like Keir, and they gave him kind of like first digs to have a go, and he actually was quite subtle about it. He was like, "This is the problem with the Conservative Party." But Ed went to town. He went full house on the MPs.
I mean, he did, and he also revealed a little of his own unsuccessful gambling career, but. It's about the first thing I've heard him say, which could constitute a discussion of policy rather than just messing about and hoping to get his photo in the papers. Still, anyway, we touched on football a bit, and I had Georgia in the office sweepstakes, so I was a little bit disappointed in their result last night. But they've been brilliant to watch. And you were out there in Tbilisi at the time of their greatest ever victory, Ted. So tell us a bit about that and what SBC Summit Tbilisi was like. We've heard back here it was an epic event.
It was one for the books. Obviously, things just went off the perfect send off with Georgia beating Portugal, but. My advice to anyone working in gaming at the moment is go and visit these Eurasian markets, these developing economies, because you've got to have an on the ground perspective of what is happening there and how kind of these cultures are adjusting to gaming. And also just the main differences. I mean, one of the things is I was out there with Simon Westbury, a great friend of mine, working for Digitane, real head when it comes to that region. And he was saying, look, one of the things that we're going to see, and I think you spoke about this with Jessica on one of the podcasts, is the generational rift that is happening in gaming in terms of the age of the consumer. And there it is so visible. And we had a very good conversation on kind of the dynamics that are being played out between an old Western Europe that's reaching a kind of median age of 46 to 50 versus a new Europe where your consumership is beginning to get from 30 to 35. And no one can kind of deny that that's happening as we speak. But I'd just like to put a shout out to Lasher and his team at SMH. Just a fantastic week, and one that I will never forget.
Oh, that's great. And the team at SMH is fantastic.
If you can pitch me for Georgian ambassador, that'd be great. I'll do a great job. I'll wear a waistcoat like Gareth.
Wow. I'll tell you what, if I bump into David Lammy, our soon-to-be Foreign Secretary, in the next couple of weeks, I'll ask him for you, Ted. I'll see how that goes. But yeah, back to reality. God, it's election week. God, I don't know where to start with this. I'm a great, as a sort of someone who has a history degree, a great interest in history. I was thinking it's so important to vote. The right to vote was, took so much effort, so hard earned by our forefathers. I've always done this, even in sort of things like parish council elections, police and crime commissioner elections. But I'm really struggling with this one. I'm so unenthusiastic about the choices ahead of me, but I will drag myself down to the polling station and put a tick in the box for somebody at on Thursday. But how are you feeling about it, Ted?
Similar, really, Martin. I think it's particularly uninspiring, isn't it? It looks, all the opinion polls are suggesting, I know we've said this in previous podcasts, all the opinion polls are suggesting that Labour are going to, trounce the Conservatives, for want of a better word. I know we can't always trust opinion polls. Obviously, the Brexit referendum and Donald Trump's election back in 2016 showed us that the polls aren't always spot on. But they seem pretty convincing this time around. The thing is, it's kind of like what I said earlier, and I know this has been made. This observation has been made by a lot of different political pundits. It doesn't really seem like the prevailing mood is that people are really enthusiastic about Labour. They're just fatigued by the Conservatives. And Keir Starmer, I think, he's proven himself over the years that he's a good administrator, I think, and obviously he's had his experience with the in the Crown prosecution service, hasn't he? But in terms of like a leader and sort of a media sort of figurehead and all that, he doesn't ever come across as particularly inspiring. He doesn't grab a lot of people's sort of loyalty. I think it's just more of he happens to be the guy in charge at a time when people are ready for just ready for a change in administration, basically. And a lot of the other, Ed Davey, again, you said earlier, I can't actually name a single Lib Dem policy. They've just sort of it looks like they've been having fun on the campaign trail, which might be one of the greatest hustles we've ever seen in politics. I think the Lib Dems might just be using this as a way to have a bit of a holiday for a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's not a particularly inspiring campaign or election. Yeah,
well, that Lib Dem policy might not be very effective, because I don't know if you remember a few years ago when Bez from the Happy Mondays stood for the Party, and he lost his deposit, unfortunately. But there we go. But we did get to see him. We did get to see him being interviewed on the Daily Politics, which was great. So I say it's important for you to go and vote, Ted, but I checked the odds in your constituency earlier, and Labour were 1,000 to 1 on to win the seat in your constituency. So I think if you wake up with a bit of a cold, you don't need to worry too much about your vote not counting. So Ted, slightly different question to you. You've had this this betting, what the newspapers are calling a betting scandal. I don't think it's myself, I don't think it's particularly scandalous. Do you think there'll be a fallout at all for the betting industry from that?
Yes, and that fallout is lots of kind of shrieking articles about what does GambleGate mean, and what does it reflect about the body politic of British politics. It has been a very tedious affair. It's one that has shown like an epic, kind of almost like Coen brother levels, level of stupidity for what has been just a shocking and just dreary kind of 6 weeks of campaigning. And okay, I mean, when that news kind of first broke, I actually kind of feel sorry for the UKGC because there's no kind of compliance or KYC tool for just abject stupidity. So I could literally write that case file in 2 sentences, right? Some dum-dums thought that they could outwit bookmakers and clearly got left out. And now there's this, every time a politician goes, they're asking them like, well, have you ever gambled on a market? And yeah.
Yeah, and like most adults, most politicians have had a bet at some point in their life, which is a strange development. I did see the rarest of things in the Financial Times today, though. Some praise for the Gambling Commission, where they were described as having dealt with this affair adequately. I mean, that is high praise for the Gambling Commission in the press. Still, okay. I think we're approaching the end of our time here, and I don't think we want to depress people too much by talking about the election anymore, or thinking about the election anymore. So just to round off, Ted, coming to you. Obviously, there's not a lot of point in betting on the outcome of Thursday because it's a foregone conclusion according to the polls. What's your next political bet going to be then? What's your big fancy in politics that's going to win you a few quid?
I guess I don't know if I'm going to call out a specific person or candidate here, but I think with the Democrat Party in America becoming a bit more critical of Joe Biden after the first debate last week where he didn't come across too well, I think an interesting market could be who could replace, if they do decide to ditch him as candidate, who could replace him. I think that could be an interesting one to keep an eye on. I'm not going to make any specific call myself, so I'm afraid I'm doing a very politician-esque thing here, Martin, and avoiding your question. But I'd say I've not followed the US election process this year half as much as I should have done, really. So I'm afraid I don't feel knowledgeable enough to make a call on that. But I do think it could be an interesting market to have a look at who could potentially replace Joe Biden as the presidential nominee this year.
Yeah, I have been having a look at that. You won't be surprised to hear. Some people are talking about Gavin Newsom, but he doesn't appear to have done a great job in California, which would count against him. So I think Kamala Harris is still a solid bet to be the next president. But we'll see how that pans out. And what about you, Ted? If you were pitching on something, having a bet on something political, what would your great tip be?
I'm going to keep it British. And look, I mean, this is a seismic election. What's going to happen on Thursday? But the real outcome here is like what happens to the Conservative Party once, if they perform as badly as the polls. And you're now looking at who's going to be the main opposition, and a lot of the attention is going to be on Farage and his deal making and how he kind of lands reform to not necessarily be an outright party in itself, but how it kind of integrates, kind of penetrates itself more with the Conservative Party. So Farage, to me, main opposition leader within kind of the next 2 years, could be a likely outcome. Then looking around, like Ed Davey, I reckon he's going to go on Dancing on the Stars. And Rishi, he's off to California, isn't he? I mean, I could see him leading kind of I think that man looks at Nick Clegg and picking up £50 million a year at Facebook and says, that is the type of job that I could do. And I really do feel for Rishi because, I mean, I think he's a guy who wanted to be PM, right? And he's now kind of moved into like a small flat in London, and it's decorated by the wife of the man who hates him. That is so depressing.
Yeah. I can see Rishi doing the equivalent role to Nick Clegg, but at X. Because, that's a bit more right wing, isn't it? So he could slot in there, have some debates with Clegg in front of Congress. That'd be relatively entertaining, I guess, but still. Anyway, So I think that brings us for a close to today. On the depressing note that we have an unexciting election on Thursday, and Ted is worried that Nigel Farage might be an even more prominent figure in British politics in the next 5 years. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back again tomorrow with another edition of iGaming Daily. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.